Good morning, everybody. It's Dr. Antonio from Still Point Ayurveda in Philadelphia. Back again on another Monday morning, a lovely Monday morning, discussing many topics. And this week's topic, that's going to be in several parts in the upcoming weeks, is about food. Let's talk about food. So, as an Italian, first generation Italian, talking about food comes very naturally to me. it's one of the many things that I get very passionate about, as any Italian would, when discussing food. Food is one of the most amazing components that adds to our life, and or can add, stress to our life, and can be used when we are stressed in life. So food is one of those things that connects us all universally. It allows us to exist in a body, because without food there is no body, and food allows us to engage in a way in the world that is really amazing. And so talking about food, I get very excited about watching certain cooking shows. I get very excited about, and I've been cooking pretty much for many decades. Started out very young with an Italian mom that was cooking amazing food and serving us regularly. And although having my family from Italy, we have some traditional meals, we also were integrating into the American scheme of things, and so we were integrating some of the Americanized foods, some of the Western foods. And so I've learned a lot of different things about food in general and how to cook. And then once I came into Chinese medicine at first, and then and macrobiotics especially, and then Ayurvedic medicine, and the art of cooking, the science of cooking according to Ayurveda, it really has reshaped and reformed how I cook. And there are so many different components to actually cooking. And also when I teach a normal cooking class seasonally, pre-COVID, I was teaching seasonal cooking classes. We would have about 5 recipes that I would type on paper and write it down, and then share it with people. One of the goals of that was to get recipes out of my head and onto a piece of paper. I have many recipes in my head, and so I had forced myself to commit to teaching many cooking classes, and in doing so I was able to transcribe that information from my brain onto a piece of paper and then share that with people in the cooking classes. And additionally, every month, within the context of Ayurveda, within the context of seasons, I write particular recipes up, share particular recipes for that month, for that season, because cooking is a very complex topic, especially when you're getting more into the methodology, the understanding behind how to cook, what you're cooking, when you're cooking for, who you're cooking for, all these different things. So today's discussion is just going to be a general discussion about food. And so what's important to understand is that general cooking, and I've posted about this on my Facebook timeline recently, that westernized cooking, Western cooking, culinary types of cooking, all those kinds of cooking, mostly are geared towards and serve just satisfying the sensation of the palate. So it's about getting it into the mouth and getting the mouth to taste certain things. And then, depending on what the meal is, or the combination of meals and things like that, the understanding of how it stimulates your mouth when you put it in your mouth, because that's going to stimulate so many different things. I mean, it's not coincidental that the senses are here, and the primary senses are here, and all the information you're receiving when you're smelling food and you're tasting food and you're hearing food, because there are sounds connected to different cooking processes and outcomes of cooking. And yes, there's a chemistry of cooking. Cooking is chemistry, basically. And so knowing that when we're putting it in our mouth, it's translated one way, as this tastes really great, I can taste this flavor, this season, etc., etc. But in Eastern cooking, in Chinese cooking, especially in macrobiotics, but especially in Ayurvedic medicine, which is the most developed scientific body designed to understand so many things, especially cooking, because it understands, the system of Ayurveda understands that the food components are contributing to the formation of the healthy cells and tissues and organs and overall body and well-being of the body. So there is a science to understanding why certain foods are given to certain people at certain times of day, certain times of the year, certain times of life, because this is really a very thorough, efficient understanding of how to maximize the potential of food. And it's not just about taste. It's about how the body receives it and how it processes it along the way through the digestive tract, through the different digestive organs, from beginning to end. You know, it's macromolecules to micromolecules. We're getting these large, gross molecules coming in, these substances, these big pieces of food, big for the mouth, that we break down, we masticate, and then eventually it makes its way down with all the different types of enzymes and, you know, the salivary glands that contribute towards the breaking down of food, of carbohydrates, and etc. There's a whole complex chemical process, physiological process that's involved in food, and on a microcellular level, Ayurveda understands like what food is doing what, where, and when more often than any other kind of system of medicine. And so we can understand as Ayurvedic practitioners, professionals, doctors, that when a person's coming in with certain health conditions, that very first and foremost, that first step is, what is this person eating? What have they been eating for a certain period of time? Are they eating? How are they eating? How much are they eating? Which is another very important piece. And I've talked about that in past classes called Matra and Kala, portions and time. And so understanding all these different pieces really contributes to the health and wellness of any individual. It's not about just how pretty the food looks. It's not about how it tastes, because just because it tastes amazing doesn't mean the actual body is going to receive the information at the lower level below the neckline, all the way down to the digestive organs like the stomach and the spleen and the pancreas and the liver. It's not going to get translated the same way. So to that degree, we have to understand that cooking is a holistic process. It's very integrated. So in Western cooking, in Westernized cultures, you know, we see a high incidence of obesity and diabetes and depression and anxiety and all these other kinds of issues like insomnia and, you know, constipation, etc., that a lot of the times has to do with what a person is eating, how they're eating, how much they're eating, what they're not eating, when they're eating, all of these things. It's not just about that. Then we add in the aspect of emotional eating, and emotional eating is something very important to consider as well, because what is the mind dictating? The body might say, oh, I'm feeling really good and full from breakfast, and all of a sudden something happened between breakfast and lunch, and now you're stimulated, you're triggered, you're traumatized somehow, or re-traumatized somehow. And the mind, depending on the level of the mind and its qualities and how it deals with stress, might automatically gravitate to something to consume, because that's the way we connect to feeling safe, is food. It was one of the things that we did when we first were released from our mother's wombs. That first thing that we actually did do was take a breath. When we were released from our mother's womb, whether it was through vaginal birthing or through a C-section, the first thing as little babies that we did was we took a breath. And that's the inhale. It's the first thing, that gasp, that cry, whatever. It's the first intake of the oxygen in the atmosphere external to the mother's body. And then the thing we did secondly was we ate something. So more than likely we were breastfed. Some of us weren't breastfed, so we were given some sort of version of milk to support that. Milk was the first substance. It's very healthy, especially when it comes from the mother in general. Not always. The mother's milk isn't always healthy, and this can contribute towards the ill health of children. But that's a whole other different topic, talking about pregnancy and prenatal, postnatal, etc. So the general context is we took a breath and then we started to eat. All of us started to eat. If not, we wouldn't be here, because without food, there is no body. Without breath, there's no body. The last thing we do, one of the last things that start to go in the elder years or prior to dying, whatever age that might be, depending on conditions especially, is that we stop eating. We start to have a decrease in necessity to eat. We don't eat as much. We don't eat the same things. We have a more simpler palate, appetite in general. And then the very last thing we do is we take a last breath, which is the exhale. And if we took one more breath after that exhale, just before we thought we expired, we would still be here, because that inhale is what keeps us going. That exhale doesn't guarantee an inhale. So anyway, so food is a very primal instinct. And so when we are stressed, especially in the Western cultures, we go towards food. We go towards comfort foods. We go towards foods that are very heavy. Sometimes, depending on the state of the emotion, whether you're anxious or angry, the food quality itself, the characteristics of the food themselves, will be representative or reflected of what's happening in the state of the mind. And so this is a very important piece that Ayurveda knows very well, the body-mind connection. And so it's important to consider when you're in that state of exaltation and an emotional quality, what you're doing in that state. Are you giving in a little bit, which can be okay, but when you start to exceed a certain threshold, then you start to experience the negative effects of eating or overeating or undereating or eating erratically and things like that. So going back to food is very personal, right? It's something that you become very intimate with. You just put into your mouth and it's going into your body. And, then at that point, to some degree, if you're not aware of it, we don't know where it goes. It just goes somehow down the digestive system, gets processed, and then, a byproduct that we know is a result of eating something or drinking something, we pee or we poop. So we know something came in based on what comes out. And I've talked about this many times before, and Ayurveda is really great at talking about input and output. And the last couple of sessions were about input and transformation, metabolism, output. And so we know what goes in must essentially, inevitably, come out somehow, some way. Ideally through the proper avenues of expression. But when not, then we start to see how it can transfer into other places in the body and that level of consciousness. So food is very personal. So knowing what to eat is a big piece of life at certain times. For some people more than others, because there are some people that don't really like to eat. They really don't care to eat. They forget to eat, or they don't have a connection to food. They just basically eat because they know it's something that they have to do, which for me as an Italian, I'm going to eat. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be lovely. It's going to be wonderful every time. Even if I'm not feeling well, the food I know is going to be amazing, because the end result is I'm going to feel amazing. So when I make some temporary modifications in those moments that require that, then I know the end result is that I can feel great and then go back to eating what I was eating in a good, healthier way. And so food that we know is close to us, food that we grew up with, there are pieces of this that are very important for us. Adapting fully a culture's food that's not our culture primarily can cause negative health influences according to Ayurveda. One of the most important and many of the important terms of Ayurveda is called satmya. It's that type of food that over long term produces a positive health outcome and when used regularly. And so over long term, any particular food that gives us this amazing outcome of a sense of well-being and inspiration and vitality and clear mind and natural sensation towards eating and drinking and sort of engagement in day-to-day functioning, when it doesn't impede this momentum of moving forward and living life in a full way, then that's satmya. That's also satmya. So foods that are something that we are familiar with, that bring us a sense of feeling good. For me, I'm not feeling the best. Chicken soup. It was part of my culture. It was part of the Italian culture in growing up, and it was part of my culture in being in America. I was born in America, but I was born first generation with Italian being my first language, and then English being something that was integrated into the household. So I identify strongly with being Italian. Just happened to be born here. Otherwise, I would have been born in Italy and been 100% Italian that way. But anyway, so understanding that there are certain pieces that are natural for me. So if my mom had introduced me to miso soup, instead of chicken soup. That would not have been necessarily proper because miso soup is not part of the Italian culture and it's not natural to the American culture. We have things like chicken soup. And for those who are vegetarians, it would be vegetable soup. But to some degree, on a cellular genetic level, the body knows what it's designed to consume. And part of this is because of what the mother was consuming during childbirth. And so this is what's more satmya for an individual. It's knowing what their culture is, where they're where they were born, and also knowing like what they inherited behind that. There are some people that come in and they say, well, I have many cultures in my genetics. I'm like, cool, then where were you actually physically born? We'll start there, and then we'll explore the other cultures and see how that feels in your physiology, in your digestive system, in your chemistry, in your mind. And through that process, through that scientific process, we can assess what is the best food and when, and things like that, because that's another important thing, is knowing when. Sometimes we're eating foods that are out of context, that are not appropriate to the season that we live in, and so that creates some other discordance with our body and digestibility, which causes health issues too, because if we're eating foods that aren't properly or readily available in that immediate climate and that immediate time of year, then of course we're going to have issues with it, because the body knows on a deeper level what existed for thousands of years before things were so modernized is we ate what was local. That's another very important piece, is what is local? What do I have access to? And then, this other piece, which is like, what can I afford? There's a way to eat amazingly healthy without having to spend $150, $200, $300 per meal, or shopping in your grocery store. It doesn't have to be that extraordinary. You can go to any local grocery store and really know how to shop smartly. And in doing so, you can avoid some of the stress, like, does it have to be organic? Certain things do have to be, in a sense, minimally treated with growth bovine hormones and pesticides and insecticides and all these things. Of course, the better the food, the better the quality of food, the better the quality of the tissues. But as I've stated before, as far as digestion itself is concerned, when the digestive system is optimally running according to Ayurveda, it's not that difficult for the body to process whatever's coming into it. The body is designed to digest amazingly. We have to just keep things in order, keep things as easy as possible so the body can do its job. When we start preventing the job of the body from being fulfilled, then that's when we have issues. Staying up late, that creates digestive issues. Eating inappropriately at inappropriate times and all these things creates digestive issues. Health is formed on the quality of the digestive system and how food is processed in Ayurveda. I'll say it again, and I've said it before, and I'm going to say it over and over and over again since the beginning, even with COVID, when everyone's jumping on this bandwagon of, I need to take these supplements to boost my immune system. If you're not eating properly, if you're not exercising properly, if you're not sleeping properly, if you're not engaging with other people and just really having a sense of like well-being in your day-to-day functioning, then things aren't going to process properly. It doesn't matter how many supplements you take. In fact, the more supplements you take, the more stress you're putting on the body. More supplements is not better. There are many times when I have seen patients come in and they've been given anywhere from 15 to 25 to 30. And one patient, I saw 52 bottles of supplements. And they do have complex health issues. But adding more supplements isn't going to make it better. It's only going to complicate things more. And if you need that many supplements, then we have to look at a different root, the actual root of the problem, in a different way to see what needs to be done. Because in Ayurveda, to the most general sense, when there's a complex health condition, then we have to go simpler. Food has to be simpler. We have to align ourselves better with nature. It's no coincidence that when people go away on a vacation or a weekend getaway in the woods, in nature, by the ocean, they start to feel alive, and like body starts to regain its sort of organization and its vitality and its inspiration, because it's reset by nature. Nature is a reset. What's part of nature? How are we eating? So if we're in a really relaxed environment and we're starting to discard, decompress all the stuff that we carry in day-to-day lifestyle stuff, then that's less stress on the mind and less stress on the digestive system, and it can do whatever it wants, so that when we go on vacation, we can enjoy what we're eating and have minimal consequences because of that. So eating can be very simple in a lot of ways, but it can also be very complex depending on the situation. And so these are all important pieces of food for thought. And, I always invite comments, and I always invite, conversation around this kind of stuff. And I love working with people over and over and over again. So if you would like to work with me more to learn about, specific foods that will support your health and well-being, that could be finely customized and tailored to you, by all means, feel free to message me, and we can begin our work as soon as possible, because I'm always open to working with new people. It's always an adventure. It's always a journey, and I love watching how it unfolds, and I love seeing how the end result is people feeling more alive and more aligned, more content, more vital, and excited, because we get to talk about Ayurveda, which is one of my favorite things, yoga, which is one of my favorite things, massage, which is one of my favorite things, and food, which is especially one of my most favorite things. So thank you all for listening in today, and I hope you're having an amazing Monday, and feel free to contact me and check my website link below. I also offer a yoga class on Tuesdays and Fridays, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Sorry for everybody else on the West Coast. And there's also a special on because of COVID in the packages that will be arranged for you when we start our work together. We can at least start a 6-week process together and getting the ball rolling in the right direction. I would meet with you once a week, and it's an exciting experience to be part of this whole system. All right, until next week, have a great day. Talk to you guys soon.